South Africa's mining environment is really difficult. At its peak, about 1,000 tons of gold a year was being mined in South Africa. Today, just 138 tons. Now, one of the world's smaller gold producers after dominating the globe for so long. What is the future of the mining industry in South Africa in the context of very difficult labor conditions and, of course, a mining environment dominated by the Mining Charter? Gwede Mantashe, of course, redrafted the Mining Charter in 2018 after a very destructive charter by his predecessor, Mosebenzi Zwane, threatened to bring an early sunset to the entire mining sector in South Africa. Neil Froneman is Chief Executive of Sibanye-Stillwater. Do you operate in a hostile environment in South Africa? Would you categorize it as hostile?
I certainly would categorize the operating environment, maybe not quite as hostile, but it is very difficult and it's a lot more onerous than anywhere else that we've operated.
What makes it more onerous?
Well, first of all, you've got real complexities in terms of historical issues. The mining industry is seen as an industry that supported apartheid, and to some extent there's a bit of punishment being dealt out. It's as though we have not moved forward. So we live with those legacy issues, and those things certainly that did happen can never ever happen again. So I'm not condoning them at all, but to continue to beat up the mining industry over historical issues makes it a very difficult environment to operate in. I think the other thing we have is we've been through a very difficult phase from a regulatory point of view, and then we have a very labor intensive industry, and of course expectations, under delivery by government is pushed.
Under delivery by government. Now that's interesting, because now you're going to pick a fight, because government would say the mining industry doesn't play ball, the mining industry is not sufficiently transformed, the mining industry does not do enough in terms of a social compact, perhaps. You may employ people, you may develop your mines, you may pay your taxes, but you don't do enough. The mining industry constantly faces this burden to do more.
The mining industry has transformed hugely. I have seen incredible transformation take place. Is it sufficient? Absolutely not. Transformation will be an ongoing issue, I think, in any business. But the one industry that has been through major transformation is the mining industry. In terms of social commitments, the industry has made very significant social commitments. What we've done very badly, we haven't promoted those. There's been huge investment in the upliftment of communities, and unfortunately the lack of service delivery, which government cannot say has happened, is put at the door of the mining companies.
So when you fire a shot at government and say government hasn't come to the party, specifically what should it have done that it has left undone?
Well, delivery of infrastructure, delivery of water, delivery of housing, the functioning of municipalities, a lot of those sort of things have not happened, which has not allowed the development of social and labour plans that we've committed to take place in an environment where we have services that we can hook into. There's many examples like that. But even having said that, there has still been enormous contributions by mining companies to schools and other programs.
Yet, many of your workers, and those particularly affiliated with AMCU, have been on strike for nearly 3 months, and that's threatening to spill over into your platinum group metals business in South Africa as well. The protest as recently as last week at the Chamber of Mines by AMCU, basically being very critical about Sibanye-Stillwater, the way you operate and the wages.
Yes, and I think it's important to note that 3 of the 4 unions are not present, are happy with the way we operate, have signed a wage agreement, and in fact, if you go back a little bit in terms of the process of that whole wage negotiation, AMCU was supportive, in fact was instrumental in helping us develop what was eventually signed by 3 of the 4 unions. It's only when its leader became involved did it suddenly become unacceptable and there were these additional demands.
Are mine workers' demands unreasonable? I mean, some of the people who work for you go 4 kilometers underground, 8-hour shifts a day, takes ages to get down, ages to get up. It's not exactly the most comfortable work environment. Sure, there are the cost pressures that you face, but are mine workers' demands that unreasonable for a living wage in 21st century South Africa?
Well, certainly miners are some of the best paid workers in business. We track the relative rate of a mine worker versus a worker in the steel industry versus a worker, in the retail sector, and we are some of the best payers. Our miners or our workers, a miner is somebody that has a blasting certificate, but a worker who helps a miner, together with his bonuses, so his total remuneration package, including all the benefits of housing, if he takes housing, accommodation, whatever it may be, medical, is in the region of 14,000 Rand a month. I would argue that is a good wage for the level of skill. Is it an environment that's pleasant to work in? Well, it's a tough environment, and I understand that, but it's considered a good job in terms of the International Labour Organization. You got
your fractious labour environment, you've got a regulatory environment that seems determined to be punitive. When you did the Stillwater deal in Montana in the United States, and you look at the huge profit contribution that comes from there with considerably less effort and less risk, less politics, and perhaps an easier environment, do you not want to follow the likes of Goldfields' example and Anglo Gold Ashanti apparently also looking to exit South Africa as a mining country? It's just too blimmin' hard for high-risk returns.
It certainly is a very difficult environment to prosper in. Do we want to exit South Africa? Not really. We want to
Not really?
No.
You've considered it?
Certainly we've given very good consideration to growing our business outside of South Africa, but being proudly South African and flying a South African flag internationally. We have very significant operations in South Africa. A large part of our business will be here for a long time, and therefore we will always be South African. So we're not anti-South African. I think, though, to be competitive, we have to look at easier resources to mine. We have to look at geographical diversity. That's all part of running a business.
So it's inevitable then that South Africa will become a less and less significant part of the Sibanye-Stillwater business into the future?
I think that's inevitable. Under these circumstances, absolutely.
Under what circumstances might you expand? We'll talk about the Lonman deal coming in a bit in the PGM sector, but under what circumstances might you consciously expand in South Africa?
Yes, and I'm pleased that you raise. There's two parts. The one is we have an existing business and it's status quo. There's capital investment that takes place to keep it running at the levels it runs. But expansion is growth capital. Investment requires an environment where A, you get good returns, and B, it's an investor-friendly environment. One of those is good returns. But certainly security of tenure is an issue to investors. And when you start having debates around expropriation of land without compensation, nominated assets, and all the issues that are currently receiving a lot of discussion, those are not conducive to creating an investor-friendly environment. Our charter's gone some way to moving back from where we were very negatively positioned a few years ago, but I would still describe the current charter as not investor-friendly yet.
We'll talk about the investment environment in just a moment, because one of the assets that Sibanye-Stillwater has acquired and still going through the final stages of the tick box approach that has to happen in terms of acquisitions in the mining sector is Lonman. Lonman, once one of the world's biggest platinum producers, fell on hard times, of course, epitomized by the Marikana massacre 2012. And that legacy, of course, still persists within the platinum belt. We'll talk about Lonman, we'll talk about the future then of the platinum group metals sector in South Africa, and also, of course, globally, where lots of opportunities do exist. More with Neil Froneman in a moment.